Bend Around the Wind by Skylia. Chapter 27. Calm Before the Storm. For the 100th time that day, when Tony glanced up from his work, he found Loki's eyes on him. It was not a novelty, since Loki always seemed to try and figure things out only by staring at them for a long time. If he did not know what kind of reaction it would cause, he would have told him already how B seemed to be the same. There were subtle things about her face when she stared at something. Tony could read curiosity, confusion, and wariness. Once he was almost certain that he saw a tiny hint of amusement in the way her eyebrows lifted. Loki was easier to read in a way. He had incredible control over his face and body language, but Tony spent enough time around him to pick up on the small things. This stare he could not identify.
What is it?
He asked in the end. What is what? Loki asked. He blinked and his face smoothed out into a neutral expression. Sometimes not showing anything was the biggest tell with Loki.
You've been staring,
Tony told him as he raised an eyebrow questioningly. Loki stayed silent for a few moments, looking at him, his neutral mask not changing. Your hair, he said then. That was not something he expected.
What about it?
He asked. It's hideous! Cut it! Loki told him firmly.
Why are we talking about my hair?
Tony was confused. Okay, so his hair was ridiculously long at this point. He never had it this long in his life, but he was not overly concerned about it. For our plan to work, you will have to look and act in a certain way. No one will take you seriously if you look like some common hayseed.
Excuse you, if you looked at yourself and that mane you're walking around with.
He was still very confused about this conversation, and Loki's hair was indeed very long. It reached his shoulder blades. He had to tie it up if he wanted to do something otherwise. It always fell into his face. That is different. You do not have the face to look dignified with it.
Did you just call me ugly?
Tony asked. He was so utterly confused that it was starting to morph into ridiculous amusement. I believe I called you a hayseed, Loki replied. It means peasant, if you were wondering. Loki's face was still neutral, but his tone was not. He was amused.
Oh, I'm sorry, Your Highness. Is my hair offending your delicate royal sensibilities?
Loki looked up at him for a moment before he stood up and walked to where Tony was sitting near his workbench. Yes, he said simply. Cut it! It took a moment before he realized that Loki was actually holding out scissors for him. He was serious.
I don't like being handled things,
Tony replied automatically. Loki looked unimpressed.
Where'd you get the scissors anyway?
Medical supplies, Loki answered, holding them out for Tony. Cut it! I mean it!
No,
Tony said. Stark!
No.
Why?
Because I'm gonna look like a preschooler after a serious gum incident if I try it,
Tony explained. Loki looked confused. What?
I don't know how to cut my own hair. I've never done it before and I'd rather not try. It's better to look like a hayseed than like a complete moron.
The expression on Loki's face told him that the god already believed him to be a complete moron or something equally flattering. Fine! Loki huffed, then pulled the chair Tony was sitting on away from the workbench with a single movement.
Hey, what are you doing?
Just stay still, Loki ordered. It took Tony but a moment to figure it out what was happening when Loki stepped behind him.
No, you're not cutting my hair,
Tony objected. No one is going to believe you're a serious ship captain looking like this, Loki told him.
No way.
Don't be a child, Stark, Loki told him firmly.
Have you ever cut hair before?
Don't you trust me? The god asked.
I trust you not to kill or hurt me. I don't trust you not to amuse yourself on my expense,
Tony answered. Loki stayed silent for a moment, then chuckled. Yes, I have cut hair before, he said simply. Stay still. Tony resigned himself when he felt Loki's hand turn his head forward.
Commander,
Tony said after a moment.
I'm gonna go with commander and not captain. Sounds more spacey.
Whatever you say, Stark. It was a strange feeling to have Loki's fingers comb through his hair, smoothing it out.
I don't want some ridiculous military cut, though,
Tony told him. He had his hair that short once. He looked like a criminal. I'm going to leave a couple of inches, do not worry,
Loki said. Tony still almost moved away at the first cut. Loki did not work fast the way hairdressers or barbers always did, but he seemed sure about what he was doing, so Tony relaxed after a few moments. That was the thing about haircuts. The way Loki ran his fingers through his hair over and over again was really relaxing. Tony always knew he had a steady and precise hand. He watched him work on his armor enough to see that, how his long, slender fingers never wavered. Tony wondered if he played any instruments. He could surely draw. That was obvious from the engravings he could make. It was not something he would have expected from someone like Loki, but contradictions seemed to be his thing, so Tony tried not to be surprised. He also made use of the leather he bought on Wobblar. He only made simple vests and tunics, not designer clothes, but it was still more than Tony could have done if it came down to it.
You're a prince. Why can you do things like this? Tony asked.
What things? Loki asked.
Things like forging blades, engraving metal, clothes, cutting hair. Maybe it's different in Asgard, but on Earth princes are not famous for having such skills.
No, it is not so in Asgard either, Loki replied after a pause. Now elves, on the other hand, are quite different.
The ones in Alfheim?
Tony asked. He remembered there were several types. Yes, Loki answered. The elves value skills of creation. They are not a warrior race like the Aesir, and they do not expect their nobles to learn nothing but battle and politics. In Asgard, the best way to prove yourself is through battle. You need to know how to wield a sword, a spear, or an axe. You need to be good at hunting. Those are the most important skills for a man. Gutting and crushing and killing.
Sounds dull,
Tony remarked. Incredibly so, Loki agreed. Battle can be exciting, and so can be training. But there's only so much mindless hacking and smashing one can bear before it becomes infuriatingly monotonous.
And the elves?
Elves value the crafts of creation. Forging, sewing, carving, currying, engraving, magecraft. They do not believe that picking up a weapon and knowing how to pierce or smash someone with it is a true skill on its own. An elf warrior needs to make his or her own weapon, carve their own bow, or forge their own blade. They need to be able to make their own armor out of leather or metal, and be able to enchant it, at least with some basic runes. A weaponsmith mage is one of the most respected members of elven society. Care to guess how much respect such a man or woman would get in Asgard?
From your tone, I assume not much.
There was an elven seamstress. She was a mage, and she created the most magnificent enchanted cloaks, simple silk and wool that could not be burnt by fire, cloaks that made no sound in the wind. She was treated like a simple handmaiden by most when she visited Asgard. They called her creations pretty, and asked if she could make some gowns for the court ladies. One of the most skilled mages I have ever met, and they expected her to sit down and make silly dresses with jewels and laces. She was wise and did not take offense. I would have.
Did you spend a lot of time with the elves?
Tony asked. Not as much as I would have liked to, Loki answered. I have duties to attend to in Asgard, and the court did not look kindly on such crafts. Most of them are considered to be womanly. Others are considered too inferior for noble Aesir. A prince of Asgard should be a honorable warrior who fights true battles with blood and steel. He should only get dirty in the training yard. Leave the forging to the dwarves. It's their place to sweat next to burning coal.
You're kind of pulling my hair. Tony interrupted him. Loki was getting angry. It was best to calm the flames before they really erupted.
Apologies, Loki said, and ran his fingers through Tony's hair again a few times, almost soothingly. Then he made him turn his head down.
So you've been with the elves once in a while to learn magic, and while you were there, you also picked up some other skills.
I did not see the point in doing nothing but training, hunting, and feasting like a proper prince, Loki said. I did learn the art of war, as it was expected. I did learn to fight like a warrior, how to hunt, and how to gut and skin your kill. The Aesir are not barbarians, but they look down upon many great skills they feel are below a man of my status. Well, my old status.
They would not like me up there,
Tony said. You would be treated like a simple blacksmith, or like a magic wielder. I do not know which is worse, to be honest. Warriors at least respect a blacksmith's craft, even if they do not consider it to be on their level. I do not think that most think about how much skill it actually takes to forge a blade or prepare armor.
Or wield magic,
Tony asked. Loki chuckled. Oh, yes. How could simple tricks be as worthy a skill as the wielding of a blade? It takes such incredible practice to be a true warrior, hard training day after day, while magic is just a few flicks with a hand and nothing more.
Ouch. That sounds like a quote. Tony winced.
One of Thor's friends,
Loki agreed. The elves sound better, Tony concluded. I like them more already.
You would? I am sure they would be most fascinated by your creations.
Okay, so elves are like, you're not a real man unless you can make your own pants.
Loki laughed quietly. It is more like you're not an adult if you need others to do everything for you. There are, of course, those who perfect one skill or another, and there is no shame in asking for their work. You can buy a sword or a bow, but most rather just ask the help of a master in forging their own weapons. Sometimes they ask a tailor or a seamstress for a piece of clothing, and then they decorate it themselves.
I'm totally not an adult among the elves, Tony chuckled.
Loki finished cutting his hair at the back and slid his hand under his chin to tilt his head back. At least you finally learned how to shave on your own properly, he said.
Tony rolled his eyes. I used to shave on my own, but I had my own razors. Action movies totally lied to me. It is not easy to shave with a simple blade. I'm glad I did not accidentally cut my own throat.
His goatee was still not like it used to be. It was more circular and thicker, but it was the best he could do under the circumstances. He stared up at Loki's face while the god ran his fingers through his hair at his forehead.
I've been meaning to ask, Tony said. How come you don't have a beard?
He asked. Loki's face was always completely smooth. Not even in prison did he grow a beard, not even stubble. Thor had a beard, but he doubted it was an Aesir thing. Curious? Loki asked.
Kinda.
Tony shrugged.
I mean, your hair grows and you have eyebrows and eyelashes, but no facial hair. It kinda made me wonder if...
He fell silent, realizing where his sentence was going. If... Loki prompted. He was not smiling. Not really. It was a smile without an actual smile, if it was possible. His whole face was a bit soft, like when he was smiling, only his lips did not curl.
I mean, I saw you shirtless, Tony said. Not that I was paying attention, because I was bleeding to death at the moment.
His mind went back to that day, how they'd arrived back to the ship, how Loki had to pin him down while the elixir started working on him. He really was not in the best shape, but he could remember that Loki had a smooth chest, his skin white and pale, just like on his face and neck. And? Loki asked, while he cut off another few locks of hair.
So I couldn't help but think if, if that's the case everywhere.
Okay, so his mind decided to spill all kinds of unfiltered crap out of his mouth. Not that he was embarrassed or anything. He made a dick joke while Loki was invading Earth. He obviously had no decency. Loki put 2 fingers under his chin again to lift his face up and look down at him. There was a strange glint in his eyes and quite a lot of amusement as well. Stark, he said smoothly, his voice pleasantly light. What's under the belt is for those to know I get naked for. Then he smirked and pushed Tony's head forward again, so he was forced to look right ahead. Tony cleared his throat and sat straight. He did not know how they went from elf blacksmiths to what Loki did or did not have under the belt. It was weird, in a bizarre, entertaining way. He became also a lot more aware of Loki's fingers combing through his hair now. So silent all of a sudden? Loki asked.
You're doing your sweet voice,
Tony realized. It was the tone that either meant that Loki wanted something or that some incredible violence was coming up in the immediate future. Really?
Yes. The question is why?
Tony continued. I feel like being kind today, Loki told him.
Why?
There's this saying about gift horses and their teeth, Stark, he said. So do shut up.
Seriously, it makes me suspicious. Are you up to something?
No!
Why don't I believe you?
Loki just chuckled in answer before he started sweeping off the hair from Tony's neck and shoulders. It prickled Tony's skin, and he felt that a lot of hair got under his shirt. You should probably clean up, Loki suggested before he ran his fingers through his hair again. Then he moved and stepped in front of Tony, grabbing his chin to tilt his head up again. He combed a few locks to the side then. Tony looked at him, but the god's eyes were on his own fingers and Tony's hair.
Loki.
You're weird today. The god's eyes slid down to Tony's face, and he grinned widely. It was one of his shark smiles, as Tony called it, all teeth and strangely glinting eyes.
Aren't I always?
He asked. He had a point, but there was still something strange going on that Tony could not put his finger on.
So, I don't look like a peasant anymore?
Tony asked. No, Loki said as he let go of him. Go clean up while I finish up your armor.
I still wanted to check the helmets.
You already checked everything. Go, now! Loki insisted and shoved him out of his chair. Tony huffed in annoyance but stood and headed towards their room.
Bossy jerk,
he grumbled. Petulant brat, Loki replied without a beat, not even bothering to turn around. Tony snorted and left. When he could check himself in a mirror, finally, he felt strange for a moment. He already got used to his face looking slightly younger over the past months, but now that his hair was short again, it was like he was rolled back in time. Loki did not cut his hair too short. It was about as long as it was after Afghanistan. He could even comb it into the same style. Only his eyes were different. He could not hide all that he'd been through, even if the wrinkles caused by too little sleep and too much alcohol and stress were gone. He thought about Loki's porcelain-smooth skin, and how everything always faded from his face. No wrinkles from stress or the lack of sleep, and even if he was hurt and weakened, all trace of it was gone in a few days. You cannot look at him and just know all the things he's seen and suffered, and he was a lot better at not showing it with his eyes. Sometimes Tony caught glimpses of it, Loki's true age, all the centuries behind his gaze, and felt very, very young. He got into the shower and chased the thoughts away. If he started thinking about it, he would drive himself crazy with questions. Or even worse, his curiosity would take hold of him and he would drive Loki crazy with his questions. Maybe he could get away with it today. Loki seemed... He didn't even have a word for it. Nice? No. Amused? A little. Almost playful? Yes. Bossy without being a complete jerk? Something like that. Flirty? Tony snorted. No, definitely not that.